How could acing a test be the thing that breaks you? Lila Thompson sat at her desk, hands trembling slightly as she stared at the crisp white sheet of algebra problems before her. The clock ticked loudly in the silence of room 307 at Crestwood Middle School, each second echoing her heartbeat. Today was the day, the final algebra exam that every student dreaded. But for Lila, this test was more than just a grade. It was a chance to prove herself beyond the whispers, the sideways glances, and the unspoken doubts that had followed her all school year. At 14, Lila was the kind of student teachers quietly admired, but rarely noticed aloud. She wasn't loud or flashy. She didn't seek attention. She was the girl who arrived early, meticulously organized her desk, and whispered "thank you" when someone passed her a pencil. But beneath that quiet exterior was a mind that never stopped racing. Always 10 steps ahead, always hungry for answers. For weeks, she had prepared. Every night after dinner, Lila and her mother, Marlene, sat together at the kitchen table. Marlene, a single mother working two jobs, never missed a chance to remind Lila that hard work was the only way forward. No shortcuts, she'd say, passing over practice problems, formulas, and study guides. And Lila had taken those words to heart. As the bell rang, signaling the start of the test, the classroom became a fortress of silence. Pencils scratched against paper. Breathing slowed, and every student locked eyes on their own sheet. Mr. Harrison, the math teacher with a reputation as unforgiving as the toughest algebraic equation, stood at the front with a steely gaze. His presence alone was enough to make some students tremble. "Remember," he said, his voice low but sharp, "no one ever scores 100 on my tests on the first try, so don't expect miracles." Lila's pencil moved swiftly and deliberately. She worked through each problem with calm precision, her mind dancing through equations she'd practiced until the numbers felt like old friends. 30 minutes passed, and while many classmates were still bent over their papers, biting their lips, Lila was already reviewing her final answers. Quietly, she slid her test forward. Mr. Harrison's eyes snapped to her. "Already done?" His tone was louder than necessary, slicing through the hushed room. She nodded softly, trying to appear nonchalant, but inside her chest pounded fiercely. He approached, snatched her paper from the desk, and flipped it open with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Lila, stay after class," he said without a hint of warmth. Whispers erupted around her like wildfire, carrying the sting of accusation in the quiet murmur. Lila sat frozen, heart hammering, wondering what she'd done wrong. Had she missed a rule? Had she been careless? The bell rang. Classmates gathered their bags, stretching limbs and exchanging glances. Lila remained seated, the silence around her growing heavier with every passing moment. The classroom door closed behind the last student. Mr. Harrison pulled a chair across from her, folding his arms with authority. "I'll be blunt," he said. "Your answers are too perfect, too precise. No one gets a score like that without cheating." Lila's breath caught in her throat. "I studied," she whispered. "Don't lie to me," he said coldly. "I've taught this test for over 20 years. Never once has a student aced it honestly. Not without help." "I swear I didn't cheat," she said, her voice trembling. He stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "If you're telling the truth, you have nothing to fear. But I have to report this to the administration." Lila's world tilted. The accusation was a blow sharper than any physical pain. She felt eyes on her from every corner of the school. Some curious, some judgmental, some outright hostile. By lunchtime, the rumor mill churned wildly. "She must have had the answers beforehand. I heard she copied from an old test. No way she could be that good." Lila sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria, pushing food around her tray, the voices inside her head louder than those in the room. Why me? At home, Marlene sat with a furrowed brow, reading an email from the school with the subject line, "Concern regarding Lila Thompson's academic integrity." The message was vague and cold, hinting at suspicion without proof. Her phone buzzed. It was Lila's trembling voice. "Mom, they think I cheated, but I didn't." "Did you use your phone? Notes?" Marlene asked calmly but firmly. "Number, you saw me study every night. We're going to fight this, Lila. I won't let them ruin you. The next day, mother and daughter walked into the school together, carrying a thick folder of evidence. Practice tests, quizzes, tutoring logs, screenshots of study sessions. Marlene's voice echoed through the office as she demanded a fair investigation. Mr. Harrison sat across the table, arms crossed, eyes narrowing. Lila used a method I only taught once months ago, he said. Not many students remembered it. I remember because it was before Thanksgiving break, Lila said quietly. The assistant principal nodded, taking notes. We appreciate the documentation. No decisions yet. Marlene's words cut through the room like a knife. You accused her without talking to us first. Is it so hard to believe a black girl can be brilliant? A suffocating silence filled the room. Meanwhile, Stephanie Clark, the school's data analyst, quietly pulled test scores from all three eighth-grade algebra classes. She found that several students scored 90 or above, and that many used the same uncommon solving method as Lila. None of them were accused of cheating, only Lila. Her email to the principal was clear. After thorough review, I find no evidence to support singling out Lila Thompson. Recommend clearing all accusations and addressing evaluation fairness. Back in the school library, Lila sat with her head down, the weight of the false accusations pressing on her like a stone. But texts from her mother kept her anchored. Stay strong. I'm proud of you. In his office, Mr. Harrison flipped through Lila's neat, flawless test and compared it to others. Some messy, some correct, but incomplete. He began to wonder if his suspicion was clouded by something more than just grades. The days that followed felt like a slow-motion nightmare for Lila Thompson. Though the official accusation was still under review, the whispers in the hallways were deafening. It wasn't just the students. Even some teachers began to look at her differently, their glances laced with doubt or discomfort. The lunchroom, once a place where she could escape for a moment, had turned into a gauntlet of whispered gossip and suspicious stares. Lila tried to hold her head high, to maintain the quiet dignity she was known for, but every step through the school corridors felt heavier than the last. The weight of suspicion was suffocating, and it crept into every part of her day. Hey, Lila! Malik, a boy from her science class who usually joked around with her, approached one afternoon by her locker, but this time his smile was forced, his eyes uncertain. You okay? Lila forced a small nod, clutching her books tightly. Yeah, just tired. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. I heard what happened. People are talking. She looked away. I'm fine. But no one was really fine. Back in the school's quietest corner, in the data office tucked away behind the teacher's lounge, Stephanie Clark stared at the rows of test scores on her computer screen. Numbers, percentages, methods used to solve equations, all meticulously logged and waiting to tell a story. She'd been asked discreetly by Assistant Principal Ramirez to look into the recent cheating allegation, but Stephanie's instincts told her this was about more than just math tests. As she cross-checked scores from all three eighth-grade algebra classes, a pattern emerged. Multiple students had excelled, many used the same uncommon problem-solving technique, and no other students were under suspicion. Yet only Lila's name was singled out. Stephanie's fingers danced across the keyboard, drafting an email that felt more like a plea for justice than a simple report. Subject: Review of algebra test scoring and allegation discrepancy. 2. Principal Dalton, Assistant Principal Ramirez, Academic Integrity Officer. After thorough analysis, I found no evidence of academic dishonesty on Lila Thompson's part. Multiple students scored similarly and used identical methods. I recommend clearing all accusations against her immediately and instituting a review of equitable evaluation practices. She hesitated before hitting send, knowing this email might stir the quiet waters of the school's administration. But it was the right thing to do. Meanwhile, at home, Lila tried to push the rumors away, but the ache of being doubted gnawed at her spirit. She sat in the back of the library during study hall, eyes fixed on her open book but mind elsewhere. Her pencil barely moved as the voices in her head grew louder, echoing the harsh judgments she faced daily. Then a message from her mother lit up her phone. Hold on, baby. I'm proud of you no matter what. That simple reminder became a lifeline. Across town, in his cramped office filled with stacks of papers and half-empty coffee cups, Mr. Harrison sat alone, revisiting Lila's test once again. Her handwriting was impeccable, every step laid out clearly, no signs of copying or dishonesty. He compared it to other papers, some messy, some incomplete, and saw the same method used by others who weren't under suspicion. Doubt crept into his mind for the first time. Before he could dwell further, a knock came at the door. Assistant Principal Ramirez entered with a printed copy of Stephanie's report. "She's clean," Ramirez said softly. "We owe her an apology." Mr. Harrison swallowed hard, the weight of his premature judgment pressing down on him. "This can't just be swept under the rug," Ramirez added. "We need to own this." The next morning, the school's intercom crackled to life. "Lila Thompson, please report to the main office." The announcement was like a spotlight on her chest. All eyes turned as she stood, feeling every pair of gazes burn into her back. No one spoke. No one offered comfort. She walked slowly, uncertain what awaited. In the principal's office, Mr. Dalton sat behind his desk, Mr. Harrison quietly seated beside him. Lila's heart pounded as she took the empty chair opposite. "We've reviewed everything," Principal Dalton began. "Your test, your previous scores, the documentation your mother provided, and an independent analysis from our data specialist." Lila's breath hitched. "You did nothing wrong," he said firmly. "Your answers are your own, and you are a strong student." A silence filled the room. Then Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, eyes meeting hers with a mixture of regret and humility. "I was wrong," he admitted. "I let my assumptions cloud my judgment." "I apologize." Lila didn't know how to respond. Part relief, part exhaustion washing over her. The principal assured her the accusation would be removed from her record. As she left the office, a small part of her lifted, but the damage was not fully undone. The silence in the halls that followed was deafening. At lunch, a surprise visitor came to her side. Hannah, a classmate who had also scored perfectly on the test, took the seat next to her. "That was messed up," Hannah said quietly. "I used the same method. No one called me a cheater." Lila looked up, a spark of connection in her tired eyes. More students began to speak out over the following days. Isaiah, Layla, Andrew, all sharing stories of their high scores and the same problem-solving shortcut. None had been accused. Assistant Principal Ramirez took notes diligently, piecing together a pattern that revealed uncomfortable truths about bias and assumptions. Back in the classroom, Mr. Harrison handed out a surprise quiz. As he passed Lila's desk, their eyes met, his no longer filled with suspicion, but something softer, tinged with guilt. After class, Darnell Hart, a quiet student who rarely excelled, raised his hand. "Mr. Harrison, I just want to make sure you don't think I'm cheating if I do well today." A few classmates chuckled, but the question hung in the air, heavier than any test. The school began to prepare for a forum, a space for students to share experiences about fairness, bias, and truth. That night, Marlene sat with Lila, reminding her, "You don't have to speak if you're not ready, but if you do, you'll speak for so many who've been silenced." Lila looked at her mother and nodded, because sometimes speaking your truth is the bravest thing you can do. The day of the forum was unlike any day Lila Thompson had ever experienced in her entire life. The school's multi-purpose room, a modest space usually reserved for assemblies and occasional performances, was filled to capacity. Students, teachers, parents, and even some community members crowded into folding chairs arranged in neat rows. The air buzzed with a mix of anticipation, curiosity, and tension. Above the whiteboard, a simple banner bore the message, "Voices of Crestwood, Truth, Fairness, and Change." Lila sat quietly in the middle row, her hoodie pulled low over her head, hiding the nervous tremors in her hands. Beside her, her mother Marlene sat with a calm, proud smile, offering silent strength. Assistant Principal Ramirez took to the microphone and opened the forum with steady, heartfelt words. "This space is for everyone. No judgment, no punishment, only truth. You may speak your heart, or you may listen. This is your space to be heard and to hear others." One by one, students began to stand, sharing stories that had long been buried beneath fear, shame, or silence. Hannah was the first to speak. Her voice was steady but filled with emotion. "I scored 100 on that test too." I used the exact same method as Lila. No one ever doubted me. No one said I cheated. But seeing her accused made me realize how different things are for some of us. Her words cut through the room like a sudden sharp breeze. A few students shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded quietly. Then Isaiah shared his experience, followed by Layla and Andrew, each recounting how they had excelled, used the same uncommon technique, yet never faced suspicion or accusations. Finally, a hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to Lila. Taking a deep breath, she rose slowly and walked toward the microphone. The room seemed to hold its breath. "I didn't want to come here," she said softly. "I just wanted to take my test, get my grade, and go home. But when you're accused of cheating for being too good, it's not about math anymore." Her voice grew stronger. "It's about the expectations people have of you before they even see your work. It's about the assumptions they make about who you are. I studied every night. I worked harder than anyone could imagine. But instead of trust, I was met with doubt, judgment, and fear." Leela's eyes scanned the room until they rested briefly on Mr. Harrison, sitting stiffly in the back, jaw clenched, guilt shadowing his features. "I don't want revenge," she said. "I want honesty. I want teachers and students alike to check their biases, to listen before judging. We are more than assumptions." The room was silent, but it was a silence filled with respect, with listening. As Lila stepped down, Marlene stood and walked over to wrap a protective arm around her daughter's shoulder. The crowd watched as mother and daughter shared a quiet moment of solidarity. The forum stretched on for another half hour. More students found courage to speak. Teachers admitted mistakes, pledging to do better. Assistant Principal Ramirez promised ongoing fairness training and open dialogue forums. Then Mr. Harrison rose. He cleared his throat, voice unsteady. "I've always thought of myself as fair," he began. "But the truth is, I'm human. I made a mistake, assuming dishonesty without evidence. I let my own fears and biases cloud my judgment. To Lila and to every student I've doubted unjustly, I am deeply sorry." The apology was raw and sincere, imperfect but real. Later that evening, Lila sat at her kitchen table, opening her math notebook for the first time in days. The familiar sight of numbers and formulas calmed her. "Do you still want to study math after all this?" Marlene asked with a knowing smile. Lila smiled faintly. "Yeah, because truth spoken out loud creates space where silence once lived." In the weeks that followed, change began to seep through the walls of Crestwood Middle School. Mr. Harrison paused before jumping to conclusions. He asked questions, listened, and sought understanding. Monthly forums were established where students could share stories without fear. Teachers began training sessions on unconscious bias and cultural sensitivity. And Lila? She walked the halls with a new kind of pride. The pride of someone who faced doubt, stood tall, and made her voice heard. The whispers stopped. The stairs felt less steep. But more than that, Lila stopped carrying the invisible weight of others' assumptions. One sunny Saturday afternoon, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, Marlene watched Lila work through a challenging math problem. Not for a grade, but simply for the love of it. "There's a lesson in all this," Marlene said thoughtfully. Lila looked up. "People will doubt you," Marlene continued, "sometimes because of how you think, sometimes because of how you look. But how you respond, that is where your true power lies." Lila nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "You didn't just respond," Marlene said. "You stood up. You told your truth. You made people listen." Lila's gaze dropped to her notebook, then lifted with quiet determination. "Do you think things will really change?" Marlene smiled warmly. "Not overnight, but you opened the door. Now it's on others to walk through." That night, Lila opened a fresh page in her notebook and wrote 3 simple words. "Know your worth," because no one else can define it for you. Her story became more than just her own. It became a beacon for anyone who has ever been doubted, silenced, or overlooked. A reminder that brilliance is never a crime, and that courage to speak the truth can change a world.